Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on this channel right here at thebibleforum.net. And we're here for a couple hours looking at life through a biblical lens. I want to talk to you this evening about the United States Supreme Court. They heard a case this week. This is the first full week in March 2016 on a Texas abortion case. This is probably one of the most important abortion cases since the 1992 Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which argued before the Supreme Court then. Casey shifted away from Roe v. Wade's focus on privacy and instead asked whether abortion restrictions were an undue burden on women. Now it's shifted a little bit differently. At issue now is a Texas law that added safety standards to abortion clinics. How dare you? Making abortion clinics fall in line with other surgical clinics. Hallways that are wide enough for gurneys to wheel women into an ambulance is one of them. It also requires physicians to have admitting privileges at the local hospital. The case concerns Gonzalez versus Carhart, 2007. Justice Kennedy was sitting at that time, joined the four conservatives in ruling that laws against partial birth abortion were not an undue burden. The court, however, has not been clear about what an undue burden means. This whole thing has stayed very gray. And so the observers now of the High Court are wondering what they're going to do with this case. This case is called Whole Women's Health et al. Versus John Hellerstedt. John Hellerstedt is the commissioner for the Texas Department of State Health Services. Justices are trying to decide whether to allow this case to be submitted. At issue is abortion doctors who need to have admitting privileges if the clinics want to stay open in Texas. It seems a no-brainer to anybody that is looking at it objectively, given the seriousness of the procedures and the number of times a woman has had to be transferred to a hospital. However, the abortion rights group advocates don't seem to care about any of that. And when you think about what they're doing, it makes sense. They're killing babies. That a mother may also lose her life seems to be an acceptable risk. You say, well, that's not fair. Well, what do you call it? What do you call tearing a developing child from a woman's uterus? Tearing it. What do you call injecting a vicious chemical in there to dissolve the baby while it's still alive so you can suck it out? What do you call either surgically dismembering this live being or simply tearing its limbs off in order to get it out? You say, but it's not a living being. Well, then what is it? It's a fetus. Define fetus for me. In humans, the unborn young from the end of the 8th week after conception to the moment of birth is distinguished from the earlier embryo. At the end of that embryonic stage, the fertilized egg has developed joints and the beginnings of iris in the eyes. After 8 weeks, major organs have begun developing, as well as the central nervous system. A woman who has an irregular menstrual cycle may not even know she's pregnant for several weeks, couple of months, as many as 8 or 10 weeks. A woman who buys a cheapy pregnancy test or doesn't administer it properly might get a false reading. About 60% of abortions are done in the first 9 weeks. 95% are done by week 15. The idea is the earlier the abortion, the less the guilt. Because you can give that person in that womb a different title. They can be an embryo. They can be a fetus. They're not really a person. However, if a woman throws a bunch of ingredients in a pan and puts it in the oven, should the electric go out after 10 minutes, she will complain about that event spoiling her cake. It doesn't spoil the soup that she put in the pan, it spoils her cake. But she can kill a fetus, and it's not a child. Any questions? What will the High Court do? Speculation was that the court will either split, leaving the original law intact, or send it back down to the lower court so it will come back up again under some new judge or some new wrinkle. What actually happened this week was the High Court allowed the case to be submitted. Now, these are the games we play with fragile, innocent, defenseless lives and the women who submit to this sort of legalized murder. For what? For comfort. For her own needs. For the desires of people, she or others, who are either immoral, desperate, ignorant, or willingly neutral. We have in this country abortion on demand because our society wants it. We want it because there are more citizens who want free sex than don't. Of course, we've learned, many of us already knew, that sex is not, has never been, and never shall be free. And without sex, there are no babies. Ergo, sex equals babies. Babies mean new realities, new responsibilities, new limitations. The free sex society is by nature anti-responsibility. So we have aborted more than 58 million, 58.8 million as of this week since Roe v. Wade in 1973. And that doesn't count the chemically induced abortions that were done at home or done some other way. Nobody knows. The estimates are another 250 million. That's a lot of blood on our hands. That's a lot of workers. And maybe that's why we have such a crying need for illegal immigration. This has also helped us to facilitate the serial abortions and a lower birth rate and the abandonment of traditional marriage. It has also stimulated the proliferation of STDs. There are 3 times the number of sexually transmitted diseases today than there were in 1970. There are upwards, and I've forgotten the number, I'm going to say 10. Somebody will holler at me and say, oh, it's only 8. Okay, maybe 5. But I believe that there are 10 at least that are incurable, maybe more. The rise in domestic violence can be tagged to this as well. A tremendous amount of domestic violence when a woman gets pregnant and the boyfriend doesn't like it, or when the child is born and we didn't catch it soon enough and there's angst in all sorts of things. Or if there's some other destructive thing that takes place in this relationship, there's violence afoot. And there's a lot of things we can't measure. So when you talk about free sex, try to factor in the grief, the misery, the pain, the suffering, the death of millions of innocent children, the destruction of the marriage relationship. We don't need to do that anymore. The lower birth rate that has stimulated our immigration problems. And tell me how free it is. What's the Supreme Court going to do? We have no idea. They are pretty much divided, but there's at least one jurist, one justice who can go either way. We're not too sure about him. Stay tuned. We'll see how it all plays out.